right, welcome back. This looks pretty good. Been a couple of days here, but we're gonna get back into the swing of things. So to recap, previous stream, we were doing some more wiring up of kind of queries in our GraphQL schema. We wrote our first GraphQL test as well for our GraphQL controller. And we now have all of that working in our Docker system, our Docker test environment, our local Docker test environment. And tonight what I want to do is show you kind of a better, cleaner way to do this, right? So what we've been doing is kind of a pretty standard GraphQL setup. There's kind of a bit of boilerplate code here, right? So one of the things that's not great about this is that you have to maintain this schema file and the documentation and all that stuff in here. And then you have to go in and you have to basically manually put together all of the runtime wiring. So in order to add queries and account fetchers and things like that we have in here, all of this stuff you have to kind of keep together, right? And so this is a little tedious. This isn't the best thing in the world. And so what we will do is we will go ahead and try and clean that up. And we're going to use something called GraphQL-Kotlin. And this is a set of libraries from the Expedia team, the travel company. And they make a bunch of little libraries for making GraphQL work really, really, really well in Kotlin. If you want to get a better view of all this, I would highly recommend their blog and videos page. If you like Spring, there's an awesome Spring video of how all of this works. They presented back at KotlinConf in 2019. This was a fantastic talk. And this is going to help us not have to kind of maintain this difference between our schema and our code and all that kind of stuff. So we are essentially going to comment all this out. And we're going to basically comment all of this out. And we are going to bring in this new library, the GraphQL-Kotlin schema generator library. And then we are going to kind of implement that and take a look at this, take a look at how it works. Okay, so let's go ahead and add this library to our implementation. The latest version is, let's find out what the latest version is. 3.4.1 according to Maven Central. 3.4.1. We'll keep all of this matching. And we'll go ahead and tell Gradle to pull that in. And so we'll see here, right? Most GraphQL libraries require developers to maintain two sources of truth for their API, the schema and then the corresponding code. Given the similarities between Kotlin and GraphQL, and the ability, such as the ability to find nullable, non-nullable types, schema can be generated from Kotlin code without any separate schema specification. So GraphQL-Kotlin builds on GraphQL Java to allow code-only or resolver-first GraphQL services to be built. So this is what we're going to implement, which is going to get rid of basically all of our boilerplate, which is really cool. So here is what we're going to do. So we've got that stuff pulled in, and we can get rid of all of this code. And we're going to rearrange things a little bit in our packages to make this a little cleaner. But essentially within our GraphQL folder here, right? We have our factory, and then we have our definitions. And what I'm going to do, just to make this a little cleaner, is I'm going to create a package called schema, and I'm going to move these in here. And we'll see why I do that in a minute. We are then going to generate a schema from the package and then just pass it right in here. So we are gonna take this schema generator config and supported packages, and so this is why I put that stuff in a package. So our package is com.zsql.centerboard.graphql.schema. Okay, so this is where essentially the schema generator is going to look for our code to generate an actual schema. Then the next thing that we have to do is there's three things that we have to tell it about, right? Or really two things, right? The queries and the mutations. In our case, we're only going to have queries for now. So we are going to do this, and it's basically just going to be list of. And you'll see it brings in here this thing called top level object. So let's go ahead and look at what that is. Top level object, okay? So this encapsulates an object for to use as a target for schema generation and the class to be used for reflection. Okay, so our first concept here. We can pass an object into top level object, and that will generate, and if we do it as part of a queries, it will generate a query for us based on what we're doing. So before, right, if we look at our schema, we had a accounts query called accounts, and then it returned a list of accounts. So if we want that same thing, we can go ahead and just define a class, and we'll call that accounts query. And we will put a function on here. And the really nice thing about this is that this is all GraphQL Java, and then up here is coroutine aware. So we can go ahead, right? And so what we want to do is we want to go ahead and duplicate essentially what we have in our schema over here on the accounts query. And let me bump up this font size again. Oh no, we should be good. Okay. So we're going to bump up this font size again. Sorry, we're going to basically do this same thing. So our function is going to be called accounts. It doesn't take any arguments, and it returns a list of accounts. Okay. So then what we can do is we can just go back and take our code and copy this in here so it stays the same. Right? Okay. And we're going to annotate this, and we're going to say suppress unused. And then we can also add in our documentation here. So app GraphQL description. Use this query to get all accounts. Right. So this GraphQL description is what actually goes on the accounts, and we'll see that when we do this. It's saying this as suspend function is bad. What we can do is we can just say, like, you know, again, right, I can just show you, right? We just delay it a second. Actually, I like doing it this way, 1 second. I thought there was a time duration. Oh yeah. Wait, did they change this API? Duration dot. Wait, what does this API look like now? I thought you could pass it a time and long, and then a duration. Oh, okay, interesting. Huh, I thought it worked a different way, but let's just do this. And now what we want to do is we want to pass this object or class to our query as a top level object. And we'll say accounts query and pass this in. And again, we don't have any mutations yet, so we're not going to worry about that. So then what we're going to do is we're going to say to schema. We're going to give it our config. We're going to give it our queries. And we're going to give null for mutation. Actually, it's probably, yeah, we can just give it empty list. Okay. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Yep. We're going to need our database most likely. So we're going to run make dev, bring up our database, run this again. Okay, so server started up, and we are going to go to our, of course, our friend graphical. We're going to get rid of this, and if we look here, right, we are now seeing without all of this code, we're seeing this match what shows up here. Okay, now if I were to change this, right, and rerun this, this would change with it. Okay, so what this is doing is it's reading the object, looking at the object, and then also looking at the classes, the data classes that come back, and generating queries and types from this information. Okay, so this package gets rid of a ton of the boilerplate code and keeps the schema and your code in sync, which is really nice. Now, you do have to be careful with this, right? Because if you do this, that means it's actually kind of easier to maybe make a breaking change to your schema or cause a problem, right? Which wouldn't be good. So you do have to be a little careful, but I really like this a lot. This is much, much, much better than trying to manage a schema and then manage a code that backs it. You have, the same power that you had, same flexibility that you had before. And so, we'll go ahead and we'll say, hey, we'll do a query. We're going to do get all accounts. And, I want the ID. I want the name, description, and taxable, right? So we'll go ahead and run this query. And there you go. Comes right back. So we're gonna move forward with this style of kind of making our GraphQL API. Just because there's really no question in not having to manage this schema and letting our code do the talking, right? Keeps everything in sync. We can still add all of this information, right? So, all of these things can still benefit from the documentation. Right? So if we run this again here, right, you'll notice there's nothing on here, no description, no nothing. But if we go ahead and redo this, right, there we go. So would highly recommend, and there's more to these packages than just this one. I think this one's definitely the most valuable one. But by far and away, this is definitely, if you're doing GraphQL, if you're using Kotlin, or even if you're using Java, I would highly recommend considering looking at this, understanding all of the little pieces that they have, they have some helper functions if you're using a Spring that kind of wires this in even easier. They cover that in that Kotlin Conf video. So everything's driven by annotations. It's embedded, or it's kind of aware of the Spring lifecycle, which makes things a lot easier. There's a client, so you can essentially generate a GraphQL client. It's a build plugin, and you point it at your endpoint, your GraphQL endpoint, right? Because the GraphQL endpoint exposes the schema, and tell it where to put these files, and it will generate the queries and everything that you need, so that you can then go ahead and run those in your code. So this is something that again, we could also use this in our tests, right? So remember before we had this right here, right? We manually wrote all of this out with just a raw HTTP client. We could generate a client based off of our schema and get that capability. So they also have Apollo federations. So this works and keys into a lot of the Apollo GraphQL stuff. And again, like I said, the documentation is great. These packages make a huge difference for if you're working in Kotlin and GraphQL. So that's really all I wanted to get to tonight. Pretty quick stream. I definitely recommend you go through this more and understand it. One of the things here, right, that we also talked about and did is coroutines, right? So the schema generator has built-in support for Kotlin coroutines, and it essentially just converts that coroutine to a completable feature, which is what's being used by GraphQL Java under the hood. So and it works with other things too. If you're using React or whatever whatever you're using, right? It's all here. So would definitely take a look at this. Really interesting, really powerful stuff from the Expedia group, and yeah, definitely check it out. So that's all for tonight, I think. Pretty quick.